On a storm-lashed rock in the North Atlantic, a lighthouse once meant to guide sailors home became the center of one of history's most unsettling mysteries. 3 experienced men walked into that tower at the edge of the world and were never seen again. No bodies, no struggle, no final explanation. More than a century later, visitors still report strange sensations, sudden dread, and sounds that don't seem to belong to the wind. The question isn't just what happened to them, it's why this place refuses to feel empty. Tonight, we're telling the true story of a disappearance so complete, so baffling, that it continues to spark reports of paranormal activity to this day. This is the mystery of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. The Flannan Isles rise abruptly from the sea, a scatter of jagged rocks nearly 20 miles west of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. The largest island, Eilean Marv, is barren and treeless, its cliffs plunging straight into rough Atlantic waters. For centuries, sailors dreaded these rocks. Fog rolled in without warning. Storms arrived suddenly and violently. Shipwrecks were common. To make the passage safer, the Northern Lighthouse Board completed the Flannan Isles Lighthouse in 1899. Built high on Eilean Marv, the lighthouse was designed to be visible from miles away, standing as a solitary human presence in an otherwise hostile environment. Because of the isolation, the station was staffed by 3 keepers at a time, with a 4th rotating in periodically. Life on the rock followed strict routines: trimming wicks, cleaning lenses, recording weather observations, and keeping the light burning no matter the conditions. The job demanded discipline, cooperation, and mental resilience. It was not a place for amateurs. By December of 1900, the lighthouse was staffed by 3 men: James Ducat, the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. All were experienced. All were considered reliable. None had a history of erratic behavior. In mid-December, passing ships noticed something unusual. The lighthouse was dark, at first. Captains assumed the light was obscured by fog or heavy seas. But as days passed, the absence became harder to ignore. On December 26, 1900, 3 days after Christmas, the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was finally able to reach the island aboard the supply vessel Hesperus. As Moore climbed the steep path toward the lighthouse, an eerie detail struck him immediately. No one was there to greet him. This was highly irregular. Protocol demanded that at least one keeper be present to assist incoming boats, especially in rough weather. Moore later wrote that the island felt strangely quiet, a silence broken only by the wind and waves. When he reached the lighthouse door, it was closed, but unlocked. Inside, the mystery deepened. The interior showed no signs of a struggle. The kitchen was orderly. Dishes were clean. The beds were unmade, suggesting the men had risen quickly, but not in panic. Most disturbingly, the lighthouse lamp had been cleaned, filled, and trimmed, ready to be lit. 2 oilskin coats were missing. One remained on its hook. That detail would haunt investigators for decades. Why would 2 men leave the lighthouse in stormy conditions while the 3rd stayed behind? Or did all 3 leave together, abandoning one coat in haste? Either possibility raised serious questions. The clock on the wall had stopped. Moore searched the island frantically, shouting the men's names into the wind. There was no response. No footprints. No bodies. No sign that anyone had fallen from the cliffs. Only damage on the western side of the island hinted at something violent. Heavy iron railings were bent and twisted. A wooden supply box had been smashed. A section of rock, more than 100 feet above sea level, showed signs of impact, evidence that massive waves had reached heights far beyond what was considered normal. When officials reviewed the lighthouse logbook, they found entries that added another layer of unease. Earlier entries described severe storms, nothing unusual for December in the North Atlantic. But one entry stood out. It mentioned that one of the keepers had been crying during a storm, while another had been praying. For men accustomed to extreme weather, this was highly unusual. Even more troubling, a later entry noted that the storm had passed and that all was calm. If conditions had improved, Why had the men gone outside? And why had they not returned? It's important to state clearly these log entries are real historical documents. But interpretations vary. Some historians believe the emotional language has been exaggerated over time, while others argue it reflects genuine distress. What remains undisputed is that after those entries, the logbook stops. The Northern Lighthouse Board conducted an inquiry led by Superintendent Robert Muirhead. His conclusion was pragmatic and grounded in evidence. The men were likely swept away by a massive wave while attempting to secure equipment during a storm. This explanation fit the physical damage on the island and the missing oilskins. It suggested that two men went out together, perhaps to check the cranes or supply boxes, while the third followed or attempted to assist. But critics pointed out problems with this theory. Why would all three men leave the lighthouse unattended? Why had the storm entries suggested fear, then calm? And why were there no remains found, despite extensive searches? The official report closed the case, but it did not silence speculation. As news spread, the Flannan Isles became more than a maritime mystery. They became a legend. Poems were written. Songs were composed. Newspaper articles speculated wildly. Some stories introduced elements that were never part of the official record: arguments between the men, madness brought on by isolation, even supernatural forces. Over time, the facts blurred with folklore. But what kept the story alive was not just the disappearance. It was what came next. After the lighthouse was automated in 1971, human presence on Eilean Muthar became rare. Maintenance crews and researchers visited occasionally, and many of them reported unsettling experiences. These accounts are anecdotal and cannot be scientifically verified, but they are remarkably consistent. Visitors have described a sudden sense of being watched while inside the lighthouse. Others reported hearing footsteps above them, even when they were alone. Some claimed doors closed on their own, despite no wind inside the tower. Several workers noted an overwhelming feeling of sadness or anxiety that disappeared once they left the island. One described it as walking into someone else's unfinished moment. Importantly, no official body has declared the lighthouse haunted. These reports exist as personal testimonies, passed along quietly among those who have spent time on the rock. Skeptics point to isolation, expectation, and environmental factors. Low-frequency sounds generated by wind and waves can induce unease. The human brain, primed by the island's reputation, may interpret ordinary noises as something more. Still, even hardened professionals have admitted that Eilean Muthar feels different. Modern oceanography has confirmed that rogue waves, once thought to be myths, are real. Waves of extraordinary height can form suddenly and strike with devastating force. This lends credibility to the official explanation. But questions remain. Why did experienced keepers act against protocol? Why did the logbook suggest emotional distress? Why has no definitive physical evidence ever been recovered? And perhaps most haunting of all, why do so many people, even today, report intense emotional reactions in the same place where 3 lives vanished without explanation? History does not require a paranormal answer, but it also does not provide a complete one. The disappearance at the Flannan Isles lighthouse endures because it sits at the intersection of fact and uncertainty. It reminds us how small humans are against nature and how fragile our routines become when something goes wrong. There is no monster in this story. No confirmed ghost. Just a remote island, a silent tower, and 3 men who never came home. And yet, the emotional weight of the place remains. Some mysteries fade with time. This one seems to deepen. If this story unsettled you, that's because it should. Real mysteries don't offer clean endings, and the Flannan Isles still stand as a reminder that not every disappearance leaves behind answers. If you want more deeply researched, true stories that explore history's most haunting questions, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you found it compelling, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Because there are still places in this world where the past hasn't finished speaking, and we're here to listen.